recording. And recording on audio. We're good to go. Here we go. For this week's Team ISO, we've got a team that is having a hard time right now with the COVID pandemic. On to discuss on the panel are Graeme Nichols. He covers the Ottawa Senators and has written for The Athletic and the Ottawa Citizen. You can find Graeme on Twitter at 6sen. Welcome to the show, Graeme.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
As well, back on the show is Ross Levitan. He's been the producer at TSN, and you can listen to him on the Locked On Senators podcast daily. You can find him on Twitter at Ross Levitan. How's it going, Ross?
I'm good. Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
It's tough times. Tough times there in Ottawa. We've seen the statement released by the Senators. And, of course, the PR by the NHL has said that as a result of 10 players currently in NHL's COVID protocol, and with the continued spread in recent days, that they're going to postpone games through at least Saturday, November 20th. And, of course, the decision was made by the NHL, PA, and the club's medical groups. Oh, my goodness. It's rough. It's really tough right there right now. Man, how bad really is it, Graeme?
It's frustrating because I think if you look around social media and you listen to some of the pundits talking about the team right now, I think it's a long time coming. It's something that should have happened a while ago. And you look at the injury situation, like Eric Brandstrom suffered a broken hand while some of these games are being played, and then it's revisionist history. But at the same time, you could say, had the NHL stepped in and done the right thing a little bit earlier on, Eric Brandstrom could still be playing, and he could still have an impact on the game for the team. And I think if you look at his career trajectory and where he's at, I think he has to be frustrated because this was his opportunity to get called up, to showcase what he could do, to prove that he belonged in the NHL and was a part of this team's future. And I think for him and for the players who have to deal with this and their families have to deal with, I think it's got to be really, really frustrating for them.
So they're going to miss the games postponed versus New Jersey, Thursday, Nashville, the Rangers. Ross, was it finally the right move to make? And how much has maybe the organization dropped the ball here?
I don't think the organization's dropped the ball at all. It's nothing that they haven't done. I think the right time here, if I'm looking back and just the dates everybody went on, you mentioned 10 guys plus the associate coach, Jack Capuano, and he went on there with a player, and they were the second and third cases. And then the next day you get 2 more active cases. And I don't know if it's travel at the end of the day, but Ottawa was in Boston on the 9th, and that's where Victor Mete tested positive. At that point, you've got 6 separate guys on the team. And you don't know how many more, because at that point, right, it's, the 5th was Austin Watts, and then you have the 2 cases on the 7th, and then the 8th and the 9th. You're looking at 3 days in a row at that point, and 4 of the last 5 days. To me, it was just a league that acted too late. What's Ottawa going to do? Tell Boston they're not showing up? Tell Calgary and Pittsburgh not to bother coming to Ottawa? It's not their decision. I think this was all in the league, and they have a mandate there. They're trying to make money too, and I think that recouping lost revenue, of course, is going to be at the forefront for the next couple of years. You see that with the flat cap, but how it affects the Senators, this situation is really unfortunate. To build on what Graeme said, not only Brandstrom, but what would Shane Pinto's future look like if he had a few extra weeks or days at least to recover from a separated shoulder? He comes back, pops it right out, looks like he's done for the year. Comedy of errors, really unfortunate set of circumstances right now. And ultimately, better late than never, though. They definitely did the right thing here. And now we wait until at least the 22nd here to get them back on the ice.
What are we looking at here? If they do come back, how much of a compressed schedule will it be? And it will be tough to come back from, Graeme?
Yeah, I'm not too sure when they're actually going to go about and do it. They haven't announced anything. I think it's going to be tough. Like, they're talking about the Olympic participation as well being in jeopardy, and it really depends. It's a condensed schedule as is. and it's going to be hard to fit these games in. But, in Ottawa's case, like, just based off their start, like, they had a difficult start. They're behind the 8 ball a little bit. So I don't think it matters as much for them in terms of repercussions as it would for the teams that they're playing, like Nashville, New York. Like, these are meaningful games for those organizations. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fit it in.
Yeah, and Ottawa's in a stretch here where you're playing 15 games in the first 27 days of November. We tweeted out at Send Central, calm before the storm. Well, it sure has been a storm, but not the one we were expecting now. And with 3 games clear, you look at how that's going to play forward. Their next scheduled game is in Colorado and on a 4-game road trip through California. So that's a long way to go at the best of times. And how are they going to have extra bodies on the trip? Is everything going to be finalized by then? Is the NHL comfortable at postponing more games potentially down the road? There's so many questions right now, Peter, not a whole lot of answers really.
I think one of the curious things that I'm interested in is, like, a number of players from Belleville were called up. They were affiliated with the organization. They played a couple games with them. What happens to those players? Do they go back down to Belleville? Are they allowed to play? Like, what is going to be the status of those guys?
Yeah, and I mean, you take that a step further. I don't know how they did the whole situation, and yeah, we can get into Zaitsev and technically Batherson wasn't initially put on, but he missed the morning skate on Saturday. Everyone thought he was going to be the 10th guy. He ended up playing, getting 4 points, and then being put on the list the next day. Zaitsev on and off and on again. To me, it was a situation, and we interviewed Alex Formanton for the podcast before the season, and he lives with Victor Mete. So Mete tests positive. Formanton plays in Boston, gets in a fight. He's going toe-to-toe with another team, pretty close contact. And then the next day he's off. So what creates a close contact? Because for me, living with someone would certainly be in that boat. So that's clearly the situation. Not all these guys live in town full year round. So there's situations. I mean, last year, the famous one was Brady Norris and Stutz all living together. So there's easy to transmit throughout. So I think, the best thing to do, especially then, was take a step back and say, let's see how far this is spread initially and go from there. And clearly the NHL had something else that they were pushing, whether it was, again, revenue or just that they didn't think it was going to get as bad as it got. But once it hits double digits, you're looking at a situation where you're starting goalie and 4 of the 6 defensemen on opening night are out of the lineup. And yes, we can argue whether those are 4 of the 6 best defensemen, but they were certainly in DJ Smith's eyes on opening night. And then you're looking at 3 out of your 4 right wingers. Like, this is just deteriorated the depth chart, and a team that didn't really have depth to lose out on at the best of times is now in a situation where you're behind the 8 ball. And they went 77 games without being shut out. It was the longest streak actively at the National Hockey League level. And then they get shut out 2 of their last 3 games. So coincidence maybe, but also definitely didn't help their competitiveness throughout the last handful of games.
The NHL, they don't know what's going on with the organization as much. Ottawa knows who lives with who and who interacts with who. So it's a tough situation on both sides. When we go to the team specifically, and I'm going back to last season, they finished the season 10-4-1. That's a 700 percentage. They started this season so far exactly the opposite. 4-10-1, the opposite of it. 10-4-1, 4-10-1. Outside of everything that they've been going with, what else has them struggling so much or falling off? Because I know I had them pegged to be better. Graeme?
Sure, I can start. I think if you just look at the organization as a whole, like, they didn't really upgrade themselves in the offseason. They had a very quiet offseason, which is fine. Like, they wanted to give every opportunity to their kids and let them play and develop. But to Ross's point earlier, like, this team didn't have a lot of depth beyond those young players. So had the injury bug hit them, had this COVID issue struck the team, like, their depth was negatively impacted. And you look at the injury to Shane Pinto, that's going to leave a huge hole down the middle. And he was playing well at the beginning of the season, and he was one of their best offensive contributors, although the numbers weren't there just by shots and expected goal metrics. Like, this guy was an impactful player when he was on the ice, and to lose him down the middle, I think, has just negatively impacted the forward group. And I think Tim Stützle's a guy who should be a beneficiary of playing with Pinto, but ever since Pinto's been out of the lineup, Stützle's kind of just meandered across all the lines. DJ Smith's bouncing him from line to line, and it hasn't really worked out, and his play and production has suffered. And I just think it's a situation where the blue line hasn't been very good, and that's the weakness. I think the goaltending's been okay, but everything starts on the back end for this club, and I think the lack of depth up front is starting to hurt them a little bit.
Graham, isn't it crazy? We're talking about just turned 21-year-old centerman as a real X factor on this team. And Pinto's been just that since the start of last season. And I know maybe I'm pushing just to get a little more range out of this sample size, but without Shane Pinto in the lineup, this team has 15 wins in 54 games, 15 wins in 54 games. They have 12 wins in 16 games with him. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous what the splits are with and without this guy in the lineup. So not saying it's the be all end all, but he is a huge factor. So he goes down, and they lost a few games there. The Rangers one in particular stands out as a game they have to win up 2 goals with 5 minutes left. They lose that one. They lose by 1 goal to the Sharks. I thought that was a winnable game as well on home ice. And if they win those 2, you're looking at a situation where they're, I think, 4-2 at that point in the early part of the season. Instead, they're 2-4, and then the wheels fall off afterwards. So it was really just the whole circumstances of just rolling over, a rolling stone gains moss, or doesn't gain moss, but one that's sitting still. It just covered up, and you start to really see all the problems that this team has. And like Graeme said, it's a lot of it's on the back end, guys not shoulder checking when the puck's in the corner, that won't check behind them, and they leave guys open in the slot. It's really been a problem. And DJ Smith singled out odd man rushes against them. I didn't really see that as much of an issue. To me, it's just the defensive zone structure of this team, no matter whether they're full health or if they're in this situation they've been in the last 5-6 games. It's really something that I think can be fixed on video. Like, you can see it pretty clearly, and hopefully they can figure it out, because the pieces are there. Like, you have such exciting young players here. There are some guys going through some tough stretches. Josh Norris, I'm sure, would tell you he hasn't played his best hockey over the last 2-3 weeks, but you expect that, a guy who's been kind of thrust into a top line role. So I think you're still looking at a situation where this can be a successful year from the standpoint of development of these young players. But right now it is a big time curveball their way.
One of the things that's kind of concerning to me too is just how I think this season everybody looked at the youth and guys like Stützle, Norris, Pinto. These were the players that everyone was kind of banking on a play. But then you get like a little further. Everybody saw like Igor Sokolov was on the depth chart. I think the concerning part for me is that some of those guys, or like the next tier of young players, are a little bit further away from being productive NHL players than many were hoping for, and probably the organization as well, because the depth, I think, in the system is exciting, and it's there and it's present. I think Jake Sanderson's going to get called up at some point, but this might take longer than many people were thinking it would. It might take an extra year before this team starts pushing competitively for a playoff spot. Dude,
I'm glad you brought up Jake Sanderson. I'm heading down to the Ralph next weekend. I'm so fired up. Get a glimpse of Sanderson and the K-Train, Tyler Clevin down there. So that's kind of what's in the Sens fans' back pockets. You look at the defensive structure, or lack thereof, I should say, and then you see Jake Sanderson doing what he's doing at North Dakota. You'll see him wear the C with the U.S. the World Juniors. So the best days of this organization were never going to be this year. It's just unfortunate how it's all kind of unraveled here after such a promising finish to last year.
Let's jump on that Jake Sanderson train. He's the future of the team. A lot of people say that he's probably one of the best defensemen that aren't in the NHL yet today. How soon could he be playing, and where's the limit for Sanderson?
I don't think there's a ceiling on this kid, because whatever roof analysts want to put on him, he busts through it. At first, it was that his skating's so good, but can he defend in front of his net? His gap control is great, but can he defend in front of the net? Proves that. Oh, but his offensive upside doesn't have very many points. Is that going to hinder him long term? Well, now he's got 15 points in 11 games right now as a sophomore defenseman. The numbers are very comparable at the college level to Cale Makar. And is that a really high comparison? Yeah, Cale Makar is one of the best young defensemen in the league, nominated for the Norris Trophy at 21. I don't know if I'm putting that much expectation on him, but I just see him as a guy who's going to step in the lineup on day one. This guy, I mentioned when we interviewed Pinto, I said, you don't even know where Belleville is, do you? And I would say the same thing about Jake Sanderson. Those guys aren't going to have to worry about the minors. They already play in a pro environment in North Dakota, and their play just matches that. These guys are just groomed to be pros. And I think Jake Sanderson, you're going to see him step in. And I don't think he's going to play 12, 13 minutes ever in a game. I think he steps in and plays 17, 18 minutes in all situations. He's just a reliable defenseman that a coach will love right away. And so long as that doesn't put him up to his neck offensively, I think that he'll slow and steady grow, maybe 15 points in year 1, 20 in year 2, and maybe in the third, fourth, you can top out at maybe a 40, 45 point defenseman. A guy who, I'm not a huge player comparable guy, but Ryan McDonough was a guy who was kind of compared to him, not the fastest guy, but a great skater, great boxing in front of the net, power play, PK, just an all situations guy. So if he could be that type of defenseman, I think Sens fans would be thrilled.
We can go between the pipes and talk about maybe if this is their problem or not with Matt Murray's two-time Stanley Cup champion. And of course, with Anton Forsberg, who Forsberg had a great game that first game versus the Leafs, but we haven't seen any of that magic coming back. Let's go to the future. Philippe Gustafsson is the future. They've already called him on emergency with all this, but he might not still be on the roster come the 20th or in the future. Is the future now, or are they just going to postpone it and wait till things settle down? Graeme.
Hey, Graeme, did you want them to protect Gus or Dak?
I was a proponent of protecting Gus.
Oh, okay. I was team Dak, so I'll let you take this one for sure.
It's exciting to see Philip Gustafsson get rewarded, right? Because, to Ross's point, like Joey Decord was the goalie of the future, right? Based off his performance in Belleville, he got called up. He kind of brought that spark and energy. He looked like a gamer, a competitor who just battled in the net and provided that bit of athleticism in the goal that Senators fans just hadn't seen in a while. And, if he doesn't get hurt, Gustafsson, we're not even talking about him. He's not even here. And to see him come in late last season, thrive, build off that, has a great preseason because of his two-way contract. He gets sent to the minors. That's fine. It's just a little speed bump for him, comes back up, and he just builds off what he did last season. He's just calm, poised, athletic. The rebound control is phenomenal. And it's just to see him perform the way he has, despite some of the curveballs that have been thrown his way that are just out of his control in terms of contract status to Matt Murray and Forsberg. It's great to see. And he's thriving. The team looks comfortable playing in front of him, and he's giving them a chance to win. He's giving them a chance to win every game that they're in. And it's exciting to see. In terms of Matt Murray, I think that's the pill that we're going to have to swallow, because he just, even when he has played and played well, he just can't stay healthy and stay on the ice long enough to build on that momentum. It's a little bit frustrating. I'm sure he's probably the most frustrated one in the group.
Well, I don't know. I was talking about earlier if they can hold the fort or if time is now for either goalie.
Well, I think the only reason why Forsberg's still there, it's if they had a third string COVID style last year, it would be a lot easier. But Forsberg needs waivers. He's been claimed, I think, 100 times off of waivers in the last 12 months. I think, back and forth. We don't have to go through each one, but they don't want to lose him on waivers. And if they did, and then Matt Murray gets hurt, which has been a trend in his time in Ottawa, what are you doing now? Now you're on to your fourth, fifth guys, and those are two young kids in Mad Sogard and Kevin Mandolese that they want to play games in Belleville. So this is a buffer year, and Forsberg's in the last year of his contract. So the way that Pilsy and I set it up before the season, and it has played out that way. We had a bit of a road bump in our take here, but we're happy to see it. We're in the stands there at the home opener. Forsberg was unbelievable, 46 saves. But what they're doing is Forsberg's the backup, whether Murray's healthy or not. And if Murray can't play, Gus goes right in, he plays, and then Forsberg's there for spot duty. So I have no problem with it this year. The strange part about Philip Gustafsson, and I'm all in on him now for sure, but the main reason I was team Joey Dax, and not only because he's a friend of the show, great guy, his game in Belleville was so much better than Gus. I worked for the Belleville Senators and their production team. Pilsy and I would drive down from Toronto for all their home games, and I can't even count the amount of times Gus would let in 2 goals in the first 5 minutes and get pulled. The confidence just wasn't there. And we're looking at a sample size now in 76 games in the minors. He has an .894 save percentage. It's just not there in Belleville, but some goalies, the structure in the minors, it's a little more all over the place. And Gus, he's such a technically sound goalie. His game, strangely enough, translates better to the NHL. And he's playing lights out here. Just to give him some props, because I kind of pulled him down there, .924 save percentage in 16 games. Like, he's just given this team, like Graeme said, a chance to win every single night. So I think he deserves to be in goal. And next year he's on a one-way contract. So I think he feels good about that. But this is a bit of a transitional year in between the pipes.
With Joey Decord, he's on the Kraken now. What do you see? Do you think he still has that potential to be that number one future goaltender for the Kraken then? Because they put all their marbles in those first two guys. And of course, bring in Colorado Avalanche's starting goaltender in Grubauer.
Yeah, I think Grubauer is an interesting pickup because by all accounts, it seemed like Colorado's structure really helped him be at the performance that he was at these last couple of years. But to answer your question, I think Dax has that potential. I liked what Graham said. He called him a gamer with athleticism. I just thought that he's the kind of guy that gives your team in front of you confidence. And I love that in a goalie. I think he has a swagger to him. And that's why I would have gone with him. But hey, the Sens seemed like they made the right decision because Gus has been lights out.
Again, you can find them on Twitter at Ross Levitan for Ross and for Graham at Sixth Sens. Thank you both for joining me this week.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.